Dear brothers and sisters, this is a homily for 29th Sunday in Ordinary Time, Year B. Request or passage to the Kingdom of God forms the message for this 29th Sunday, whereby James and John in the Gospel passage, they request Jesus 2 seats in the Kingdom of Heaven. However, Christ shows them that it is more of a passage than a request to be in the Kingdom of Heaven. The third prediction of his passion, death, and resurrection elicits two main reactions that will be exhaustively explained in this Sunday homily. To begin with, let us remind ourselves the context in which today's gospel is situated. The journey of Jesus towards Jerusalem is characterized by three predictions of his passion, death, and resurrection. Generally speaking, each time Jesus announced his passion, death, and resurrection, it would elicit 1. Some reactions from his disciples. 2. Those reactions in turn would oblige Jesus Christ to give some magisterial teachings. Let's briefly look at the three predictions in this gospel according to St. Mark. First prediction about his passion, death, and resurrection in Mark chapter 8, verse 31. It takes place at Caesarea Philippi after Peter's confession of faith. Moreover, Peter reacts on behalf of the disciples as far as Christ's prediction is concerned. The second prediction of his passion, death, and resurrection in Mark chapter 9, verse 31 happens while crossing Galilee. This also elicits some misunderstanding and reactions from the disciples. The third and last prediction of his passion, death, and resurrection happens in Judea and in Transjordan as recorded in Mark chapter 10, verse 33. Indeed, there was also some misunderstanding reactions from his disciples as seen in Mark chapter 10, verse 35. The third prediction before the arrival in Jerusalem marks the immediate context of today's gospel passage. In a nutshell, Jesus' third announcement of his passion and resurrection provokes two main reactions from his disciples. 1. Misunderstanding. For example, James and John misunderstood Jesus' prediction concerning his passion, death, and resurrection. The two, therefore, made a request to secure 2 seats in the kingdom of God. Why did they feel so privileged to merit those 2 seats in heaven? Because they were first to be called. They witnessed the resurrection of Jairus' daughter. They witnessed Jesus' transfiguration. And even later on, they witnessed Jesus' agony in the Garden of Gethsemane. With all this background experience, they felt privileged to make a request to Jesus Christ. On the other hand, from Christ's response, the seat in the kingdom of God is not to be requested, but it is more of a passage through agony in the Garden of Gethsemane up to the Easter Sunday. The way of suffering is for all Christ's disciples, whether privileged or not. Despite the fact that James and John were so close to Jesus, they needed a passage step by step to merit a seat in the kingdom of God and not a jump or to escape suffering so as to earn the kingdom of God. Christ shows us on this Sunday how to merit and earn a seat in heaven is through a passage step by step through suffering, death, and resurrection. In fact, Jesus illustrates this by using an example of a cup that one must drink, meaning suffering in this context. That is why in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus wished that the cup of suffering would be removed. Luke chapter 22, verse 42. Again, in this context, to be baptized with baptism that Christ was baptized with is an expression that means suffering that each and every disciple should undergo. That is why we have baptism by blood, meaning martyrdom. In fact, according to some traditions, John is said to have been martyred, whereas James's martyrdom is clearly recorded in Acts chapter 12, verse 2. As a Christian today, do we want a jump or a request or a passage to the kingdom of God? The second reaction is from Jesus' teaching following James and John's request. Their request brought division among the community of disciples. It was 2 against 10 others. Jesus brings them together first, then teaches them about who is the GOAT, G-O-A-T, meaning greatest of all times. Of course, it is the humble servant, the one who serves others, is the greatest. Who is really humble? St. Augustine says, a humble person is the one who accepts the truth. Jesus brings together the 2 groups in the camp of his disciples because united they would stand, but divided they would fall apart. As a Christian today, whenever there is division, do we aim at bringing reconciliation and forgiveness in our parish communities, families, or places of work? To conclude, Christ proposes to us the sure and only way to have a seat in heaven is to be a humble servant. Let us pray to God to give us grace to accept a passage to the kingdom of God and not a jump to the kingdom of God. Amen. Have a blessed Sunday.